We good? All right, good evening, everybody. For the record, it is Thursday, October 10th, 2019. The City Council is out of executive session. I've called the meeting to order. Our first item is our pledge to the flag, and we got Boy Scouts Weebelo Pack 3 with us. So why don't you guys come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Come on up. Do we have like a microphone for them?
Oh, they're loud.
Get there close. See, testing. See if you get in there close, they'll hear you. All right. Flags over here.
Scout salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Two.
It's too neat.
Good job. Put your hand down.
Oh.
Stop the salute.
Excellent. Good job, guys. Thanks for being here. Oh, we got, what?
Right here.
Oh, we got pins for you guys. Go ahead and get Councilmember Huffaker. We got pins for you.
Put that on there.
Thank you for being here tonight, gentlemen.
Take one for your parents.
Good job. Who needs one for a parent, too?
You just hand Curtis, once you hand Curtis the bag, you'll hand them out to the parents.
There we go.
Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for being here.
And roll call this evening, we have all members of the City Council here today. First item on our agenda tonight would be consent items, which includes the agenda, the vouchers, and the minutes from the previous meeting.
Your Honor, I make a motion to approve the agenda, the vouchers, and the minutes from previous meetings.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Kulas to approve the consent items, including this evening's agenda, the vouchers, and the minutes from our previous meetings. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda would be citizen comment. This would be if any member of the audience wish to address the City Council on something that's not on today's agenda. We'd ask that you come up. We'd give you about 3 minutes, name and address. See. Yes, sir. Come on up. What is your troop number, please?
Trip number, wow.
Oh.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. My name is John Devaney. I'm from Yakima, Washington. I'm the president of the Washington State Tree Fruit Association. We also have an office here in Wenatchee located where the Apple Commission is on Euclid. We represent all the apple, pear, and cherry growers and packers here in the state of Washington, including many of the largest employers here in Wenatchee. I specifically wanted to talk to you today to thank you for your ongoing improvements to the Wenatchee Convention Center and your consideration of how to ensure the competitiveness of that facility in the future. Our association puts on an annual conference and trade show once a year every December that rotates between Wenatchee, Yakima, and the Tri-Cities. We attract about 2,000 attendees just in terms of growers, not counting visitors who do not pay to register but do visit the trade show. And that's over about 2.5 days. So that brings a lot of business into any community that we go to. Our members very much enjoy coming to Wenatchee. We get outstanding customer service from the convention center staff and from all the businesses in the downtown area that our members stay at and eat at while they're here. And they also shop while they're here in town. We do very much enjoy coming here, but it is the most challenging location we use. This is the smallest footprint of any of the facilities that we hold our event at. And we know that you are challenged in making sure that that facility remains competitive with other locations. We certainly can't tell the city how to spend its resources on facility expansion or improvements, but we want to express our appreciation for the investments you've already made in refurbishing and renovating the facility to ensure that it stays attractive and competitive so that our members can continue to enjoy visiting Wenatchee, as we will this December 9th through the 11th, when we'll be back here again in force to enjoy the wonderful winter weather in downtown Wenatchee. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. And our building is heated.
It is. The parking is not.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the council on something that's not on today's agenda? Seeing no takers, we have 2 presentations tonight. The very first is our annual favorite day of the year, our Make a Difference Day. And Councilmember Huffaker, do you have that proclamation?
I do. Proclamation. Whereas this is the 29th year for Make a Difference Day, Whereas each year, thousands of people throughout the greater Wenatchee Valley join in this effort to make this place we live better for everyone. And whereas bridges between communities have been lit, parks have been renovated, food banks have been filled, social programs have been boosted, hiking trails have been restored, graffiti has been removed, home repairs have been done for the elderly and disabled, ballparks have been improved, and neighborhoods have cleaned and celebrated together. Whereas it is no small effort by a huge number of people, neighborhoods, schools, agencies, businesses, churches, and organizations. We join efforts with each other for the good of each other. Whereas we invite everyone to find a project at www.wenatcheemkdd.com or post their project there. Whereas we invite people to spend time Saturday, October 26th, doing a good deed, large or small, that makes a difference in our community or the lives of the people in it. Whereas we invite people in the Wenatchee Valley to act on this motto: when there is a need, do a good deed. Now, therefore, I, Frank J. Coons, Mayor of the City of Wenatchee, do hereby proclaim Saturday, the 26th day of October 2019, Make a Difference Day in the City of Wenatchee, and encourage the citizens of this beautiful valley to join in this effort to make this place we live better for everyone. In witness whereof, I hereby set my hand and cause the seal of the great City of Wenatchee to be affixed on this 10th day of October 2019. Frank J. Coons, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Huffaker. So Laurel and Margie, come on up.
Just giving you guys all the website, so you can go and look at the projects.
I was on the website today.
And you helped us today too.
Thanks, Marie.
And Allison. Thank you.
Throwing them at us.
We
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
all the.
Thank you.
If you give me one for the mayor, I'll put it on his desk.
Oh, you.
Thank you.
I got one.
Oh, you. So tell everybody what's going on so we know.
Well, we now have just updated the website, and we have 69 projects that are going on all over the valley, all the way up to Deland, Antioch, Rondo,
Quincy.
Waterville, Quincy, and then all over the valley. And there are just opportunities at every time. You can do more than one project. Look for something good to do that day, or just make up your own project. But we have people that would love to have everyone do something that day, to do something good to make the place you live in just a little better. Join hands with the neighbor and someone you don't know, and someone you do know, and just find a way to create some goodwill and make the place better that you're at. And I want to say thanks for the proclamation. 28 years ago, my sister and I ran into the mayor's office and said, it was brand new. He said, would you please proclaim this day, Make a Difference Day? And it was Mayor Jim Lynch. And he thought it was a cuckoo idea. And he knew us. He said, okay, if you want. And we've been getting a proclamation every year, and we wouldn't feel official if we didn't get it. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for just the city. Just you make things possible when there are little glitches and we have problems, and you make it so that people can join hands and work together. And we just are most appreciative of that.
Right, so we gotta get a picture taken over here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll just leave this for all leaders.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies, for leading that every single year. That's amazing. All right. Our next presentation is sort of regarding our convention center. So John was here at just the right time. I'm thinking he might have known. So Eric Hovey is our consultant who's been working on the convention center, sort of what do we do next, if anything. So I think they've got a little 10-minute presentation for us.
Yep.
Perfect.
So Allison Williams, Executive Services Director, and thanks to Mark Kulas, chairs our Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, and they have been through a process. And at the last joint meeting with the Tourism Promotion Area Board that Ruth Esparza and Mike serve on, we looked at the recommendations that Eric has gathered through his work doing an updated market analysis for our convention center. So we have a steering committee that was formed for this process. They made a recommendation to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. So you'll find that recommendation within Eric's presentation tonight. And so he's here to provide that to you and ask for any questions. And then we hope to get direction moving forward for the convention center. So I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I appreciate the opportunity to have participated in this market study for the Convention Center over the last several months, working with the Steering Committee and the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, the TPA, and now a chance to kind of bring all that together for you. I know a number of you have seen kind of pieces of this before, so I'll be a little briefer in terms of just some overview thoughts about the work we've done and the conclusions of that. And if I can scroll this down. Easier. Okay, just to refresh kind of the initial impression here of what we're to be doing. The purposes were really to address the current and prospective market for the convention center, and those that would then serve a variety of potential uses for marketing operations and capital improvements for the future. Just by way of background, the convention center has been in business now for almost 40 years, and so it's had a great run, and I think has great opportunities for the future. It adjoins the Coast Hotel and the Performing Arts Center. I did have the opportunity to previously do some work back about almost 10 years ago with a prior report, and so again, it's very interesting to see how things have changed in the last few years. The piece in blue to the right just gives you a sense of what we evaluated in our work. We took a look at broader community context. We looked at some of the numbers of financial and attendance performance. We did a fair amount of work with stakeholders, talking to people in the community, also a survey that we did in cooperation with the convention center. Looked at some of the key regional comparables, and then finally that gets us to strategic options and recommendations. Again, just a little bit of a history here. The drawings show the top one at the top shows the top level, and then the level beneath it, which has the meeting rooms and the exhibit hall. The convention center is city-owned, operated by the Coast, with a lease that now extends through 2024. The Performing Arts Center, which is part of the overall complex, has about 500 seats on city land, nonprofit owned and operated. And the Coast Hotel, as I mentioned, 147 rooms, connected by a sky bridge with additional dining facilities and meeting space. The facility itself of the convention center is 2 stories, about 50,000 square feet, 800 that works well for banquet configuration. There are times when the convention center does more, but you have to get fairly creative at that. And then meeting capacity, there's about 1,300 in a classroom style to 2,300 or so in a more of a theater style. Just a few thoughts in terms of what we discovered in our background research. The community context here is one of strong tourism growth since the recession. We've had now a good run of about a decade. Also a strong job growth in here, especially job growth on a per capita basis. And that job growth has been increasingly oriented to technology-oriented types of job activities. And then I think the final piece that's really been the icing on the cake here is the 50% increase that you're looking at in the lodging inventory, starting with the Hilton Garden Inn and with a number of other projects passed that are planned. There are things that are the same, and there are things that have changed in the decades since the recession, kind of the new normal for our convention facilities. And in the case of Wenatchee, the utilization is not back to pre-recession use. It's kind of it's climbed up some and then bounced around a bit. One thing that is clear is that the size of a typical meeting is larger, almost twice as large as it used to be in the past. The other good news is that hotel-motel taxes and TPA revenues have been up substantially on a fairly steady basis in recent years. There is a funding potential for additional improvements. Some were recently made, but that especially takes place as there's the opportunity to basically retire the debt of the facility within the next 3 to 4 years. That would give potential bonding capacity of maybe $10 to $12 million for additional improvements, and that number will undoubtedly be refined as things get closer and plans get more determined. In talking to stakeholders, we heard what I think you heard from the Tree Growers Association. This is a facility that's well known for having great staff, but rather cramped facilities. As we talk about off-site amenities, it's very interesting to see that probably the number one rated thing are the recreation opportunities of the entire area. But it's also true that in other meeting planners and goers don't really have a clear perception of what else the community offers. So it was interesting that a lot of people just didn't have a response to that particular question. So I think there's an opportunity for Wenatchee to continue to tell its story. And the final thing we took a look at was kind of a broad international perspective of work that the International Association of Convention Centers has done, which clearly shows the influence, the creeping influence of younger millennials into the marketplace. And the top things that are mentioned globally are desires for open space, more flexible spaces, brighter, not just dim rooms, fun and technology. And it's very interesting that in the surveys that we did, we picked up on some of those themes as well. So clearly it's on people's minds locally as well as statewide in terms of groups. From the standpoint of comparable facilities, as was mentioned, this convention center is the smallest of the comparables of the east side comparables, which would be Yakima, the Tri-Cities, and also the Davenport Grand in Spokane. One other potential comparable, although not west side, but is sometimes in your competitive marketplace, is Vancouver. You see some numbers here, what I call BME, which is ballroom meeting and exhibit space at 28,000 square feet of rentable space. Wenatchee is the smallest. Kind of another interesting note is that a number of facilities also are marketing increasingly their outdoor plaza patio space. That includes Yakima, Spokane, Vancouver, and that becomes important in terms of rental capability. A lot of events are wanting to have the ability to be outside in a space that is pleasant, provides an additional sort of amenity. So where did all this go? We identified from the research several strategic options that you could consider. First one would be a status quo, kind of keep doing business as usual. It's a business model that has worked effectively for the center. It's probably the least cost and approach, although there will be continuing needs for capital improvements on at least some routine basis. However, the risk of it is that it risks erosion of the market, especially as the average size of groups that are doing meetings around the state continues to increase, and there are groups that you're increasingly getting where the size is no longer adequate. One thing we found is that the lost bookings report indicates that about 15 groups have left, and all of them, the number one reason, not for all of them, but for 11 out of 15, was the inadequate size of the ballroom. Second option would be to expand to meet or beat your competition. That would really potentially imply just catching up about up to a 40% increase in your rentable space. That's probably limited by funding. And one of the realities is there's no guarantee of success because the overall market is growing some, but it's really consolidating more. And so you could do it, and it's not necessarily build it and they will come. You may need to build it to do something to stay in the game, but that may not be the only option, which takes us to option C, which is to do something different, go small, high-tech, and upmarket, really for this next generation of millennials and their different meeting needs. The risk of that is you potentially lose some of your existing users who have been very satisfied with the space unless they grow out of it. Fourth option would be to plan to build a new convention center elsewhere. We're not recommending that. That's undoubtedly very expensive. It's potentially a backstop if the other options just don't prove to be viable. And the final one, option E, is a hybrid approach, which would combine elements of other options, as for example, with some combination of options B and C, maybe some strategic expansion with going up market, trying to keep some of the core business you have while at the same time beginning to take on new customers at the same time. And that has been the option that's been recommended by the steering committee, the LTAC, and the TPA groups. So with that, I'll just mention a couple of other things. We do have identified, and actually we did this in 2010, some overriding goal and principles for action and objectives. The overriding goal would be suggested to be to position the convention center for continued success as a pivotal contributor to the Wenatchee area's economic, cultural, and vitality, and cultural community vitality. There are some specific objectives here, and they include some things that would be, for example, making sure you're continuing to meet the needs of your facility users, becoming more leading edge in terms of high tech and touch. And you can see some other objectives down there. One of, I think, your real advantages compared to your comparables is the fact you are a downtown location, and that is something that is increasing, I think, valued by a lot of groups as they want to be in that more urban environment. And the final thing I've just mentioned that's on the list is something we called concierge service, which is beginning to really offer the opportunity to tailor services to the individual needs of convention goers. Let's say there's a group that want to go river rafting or want to go hiking or doing something else, making sure you got the services to plug them in and make it a seamless sort of opportunity for them. Next steps, finalize the report. I think we're close to having a final, but if there are any other comments or things we've missed, please let me know and we'll take care of that. Determine to what degree you're going to fit within the existing budget capabilities, which will kind of really shape how much you do and how soon you do it, or whether you look to an expanded funding program. Recommend a preferred strategic option. There is one before you from the LTAC and TPA group. And on the basis of that, go ahead with architectural and cost estimating work at a cost of what I think is tentatively I estimated at $65,000. One thing I would suggest is as you do that architectural work, go back to your customers and test them and say, if we do this versus doing that, which one do you like better and which one will keep you coming or make you come back if you're not coming, if you haven't come in recent years. Refine the design plans, implement the improvements, maintain your existing functions, and fine-tune as you move ahead. With that, I think I am done. Be happy to take any questions or comments that you have and your thoughts about moving forward.
So anything specific from E that rose to the top in terms of going up 4 stories or building a huge parking garage, or, I mean, what are sort of some of the thoughts that we've been hearing?
I think the discussion at our meeting really revolved around what could we do by expanding out into the plaza area. Parking is an issue, and it was recommended in our prior study that we do something to enhance the parking around the convention center, whether that's going up. But I think the option of going out into the plaza area and potentially adding a second floor into the exhibit hall, but obviously that needs some study. But that would be an easy way to gain square footage. We did a preliminary run through just to get the quote for having the architectural and structural study. And there could be considerable space gained by expanding on 2 floors that way. And the other thing that came out of the study was the clearly defining that you're at the convention center at the street level. That is confusing to some of our convention attendees. And so that street presence, the lobby presence, and then the upscaling really, I think, resonated well with adding technology. People really like the services that are provided at the CTC, and they have that technology person there to work with them. And so those are some quick fixes that I think the convention center operation can provide. And we've got members of our committee, Linda and Frida, are in the audience if they want to add anything from those meetings, or certainly our council members who have been involved.
If you went towards the front of the building, you're not going to be able to add seating capacity in the ballroom if you do that? Is that a limiting factor? It sounds like maybe the size of the ballroom is a limiting factor. Do you deal with that if you come out? Is there a way to incorporate some more size to the ballroom if you do that?
I think that all is, the study will tell us that. I think we can hold those out as needs that were identified and then use the architectural study to give us some answers.
That's probably one of the trickiest things, and I think that's going to be a real defining item as to can you do it and how do you do it?
I have a
couple of questions for you. On page 37, when it talks about annual attendance, and then you compare that to page 35 on rentable space. There's not really necessarily a correlation between those two that I can see. So I don't know if it's like one room's bigger or one has more tech or upscale. I totally understand that part of it, but I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around the rentable space versus the annual attendance with Wenatchee, Yakima, and Tri-Cities.
Yeah, one of the challenges here on the attendance figures between the facilities is I'm working off figures that they provide. I'm not sure everybody reports them in the same way, so that's a little bit of an issue. In the case, for example, of Vancouver, which actually is size reasonably similar to you, Vancouver does a lot more events, but a lot, I think because of just the business activity in the community, they're doing a lot of smaller business events that is not as typical for Yakima or the Tri-Cities. So there's some real differences. The other thing about Yakima in the way that they report their conventions is they really focus on the conventions that are drawing business in from outside. And I'm not sure I've got a clear picture on how many local events that they're doing as well. So those would be some of the reasons.
Local events for the Wenatchee Convention Center?
For the ones in Yakima, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Those just in terms of the differences in terms of the reporting between the facilities.
And
I have an additional question about Yakima, because I know when they do their tree fruit pork show down there, they actually divide it between their convention center and the Sun Dome. So I'm curious if this number reflects the two facilities working together?
It may well do that, because if it's an event that's coming through and using the convention center, I would presume that they're counting those individuals, even if some of the functions are at the Sun Dome.
Thank you.
And the people to space correlation, again, is not consistent because utilization of the space may be in the form of a trade show or other uses. So it's hard to make an apples to apples comparison amongst the facilities.
One other thing I would note about both Yakima and the Tri-Cities is they've designed their space so that you can expand or contract very easily between ballroom, exhibit, and meeting functions with much more flexible space. And I think that while you're in a facility that was built earlier, to the degree that you can get that greater flexibility with improvements, that will serve you well in the future as well.
See, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I should have gone there to figure.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so we expect to hear from the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee or someone at some point regarding a recommendation to spend the $65,000, or is this the recommendation?
I think that was the recommendation that came from the LTAC.
It is, and as I've had a chance to think about this a little bit, because of the risk that Mr. Hovey says it might not be successful, we kind of operate in a world that we know what we know here. And there are, I think all of us have been to different convention facilities, including some very large ones and some not so large ones. And in our analysis, I think we need to pay attention to what's the current state of the art of convention centers. Not just looking at our convention center and we're going to add to it and it's going to look the same and function the same. We really need some people involved that really know what is happening today. What's the projection of 2030 and 2040, not taking our 40-year-old facility and just making it a larger 40-year-old facility. I don't know if that makes sense, but breathe some air into our thinking on this, because we are going to take a financial chance if we proceed, and we need to be capturing these other generations that are coming up in the styles of meetings and networking that they have. Yeah. And even I would venture that Mr. Devaney would agree that over the years, the Hort Convention has changed its format, it's adapted, it's evolved. And we need to look at our convention center the same way.
Yeah, I think we get in trouble if we try to chase the Tri-Cities or Vancouver or Spokane and say we just got to make it bigger because we can get bigger conventions. I think in a lot of ways, you're just sort of chasing your tail. Because as soon as we do that, someone's going to make one bigger. And at some point, we got to figure out what we have and make it the best that we can make it on the footprint that we have to help downtown, to help the hotels that are attached to that, but not necessarily be trying to chase what everybody else is doing. Because it's got to be Wenatchee, what we can do best there, and I think stay focused to that.
And perhaps even taking a different look at the footprint that we have there and surrounding, just open thinking.
Yeah. Okay, so what's
The
next?
The estimate, 65,000, we actually had an estimate and had Alisa go back and look at that to make sure that we were putting in a number that was
So are we going to
realistic.
expect a contract from somebody at some point,
So,
or?
we would put that out for a request for qualifications and include that amount in our budget. It's not currently included in our budget, and we would use convention center reserves to do that.
Comments, suggestions? Any reason why we wouldn't at least spend the next $65,000 and see what some drawings might look like? All right,
Yep, good with that.
okay. So bring us whatever we need to do next.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right, we got a number of action items tonight. The first being the interlocal agreement regarding our regional water system. Ooh, Rob Jammerman. You want to wait a second? We're going to lose some of our folks. Thanks, guys, for being here.
I got their badge.
And they all leave.
Yeah,
Dinner time.
they fulfilled their obligation.
Actually, I wanted
All right, go ahead, Rob.
All
right. Good evening. I'm here to just ask the council to authorize the mayor to sign an interlocal with Chelan County. We, as you know, we have a ongoing search for water for our second source with regional water. We've identified a parcel down in Malaga, the Malaga area. It's a 40-acre parcel that the county owns. It's where we actually have our drying beds for the treatment plant, and RH2, our engineering consultant, has identified this as a good location to do an exploratory drill. And so before we can proceed with that, we need to do this interlocal agreement with the county. Our city attorney, Steve Smith, has reviewed this, and so we're just looking for council approval to authorize the mayor to sign this.
I'm confused. Is this our third attempt? Is this
I believe it's our third attempt.
third attempt?
Yeah, we are planning to drill 2 additional wells, one here and then one also on the Goodfellow property a little bit further to the north of this.
So, and all of these attempts have been in essentially the same geographic area. Do we have some indication that something good there? Did we have a water witcher go out? Did we have
We
groundwater analysts?
we have had the experts from RH2, given the soil type, the topography, the aquifer, and the reservoir. These locations, they believe are the next place to look. If we do not find water here, then we're going to have to pause and go back and say, where do we leave Malaga and look elsewhere or look for other alternatives?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is our third try, paid for by Regional Water, so we're sharing this with our friends at Chelan County PUD and East Wenatchee Water District, and we're still convinced that that's the area that hopefully we'll find the mother lode and be able to get our second source put together. And I think they've started to think about sort of they were pretty confident the first time they dug because they did a pretty big well and they hit nothing. Now they're digging smaller wells, a little bit less expensive, and a few other spots just to see if we can hit water. So if we don't hit here, I think we got to figure out another plan. So, but to the extent that you can find an aquifer, everyone says that that's the best water to get, and you don't have to treat it and pre-treat it and do stuff to it before it gets into our system. And so I think we're still trying to hit it.
It's interesting, you asked about this being a good location. The PUD actually has a very active well right there at their facility, just down gradient from here. So I'm not an expert in these things, but that's the experts scratch their head, why aren't we getting water when the PUD has all the water just right over there? So-
That's why you're not getting anything.
Yeah.
They got it all.
They took it all. The big sucking sound.
Well, we definitely want this. Mayor, I'm going to make a motion for the city council to authorize the mayor to sign the interlocal agreement between the city of Wenatchee and Chelan County for the exploratory drilling of wells on county property.
Motion by Councilmember Poyer, second by Councilmember Harold, to authorize the mayor's signature on the interlocal agreement between the city of Wenatchee and Chelan County for the exploratory drilling of wells on county property. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Your Honor, this is really an interesting example of how the world has changed. In the good old days, you just stuck a pipe in the river and it solved the problem.
And you know what? We may end up doing that too. We have the ability to suck right out of the Columbia River.
Yeah,
at
we
different
got some
places.
water rights, don't
Yeah.
we?
No, we do. And we've actually got them. We can,
Sewer, yep.
but I think the treatment is sort of different now when
Yeah.
they take
Oh,
it
yeah.
treated and yeah, it's just well, we'll hope we hit something. All right, Sandra, homeless grant award. Come on up.
Oh, Sandra Van Austin, Housing Programs Coordinator. Tonight, we'd like to ask the council to accept the Homeless Steering Committee's recommendation to enter into grant agreements with two subgrantees for a severe weather low barrier emergency shelter. So I think you have proposals by two agencies, the Women's Resource Center and the People's Foundation. They're distinct agencies and programs, but they're collaborating together for this effort. It would be a temporary shelter, a 3-month period starting December 1st through February 28th, really to cover that gap when the temperatures really dip. And it would be focused on low barrier access for people that can't access traditional shelters. The Homeless Steering Committee met on October 2nd, reviewed the proposals, and recommended that the two proposals be funded up to $66,000. And they recommended that as city staff, that pending your approval, that we work with the two agencies to work out all the details because it is such a short time frame.
So we're using some of the reserve funds that we didn't spend last time or some that was set aside for a low barrier shelter, and this would certainly qualify for those funds.
Correct. Low barrier format. It's a very new model. Probably help to look further to startup potentially looking at low barrier shelters in general. So it's a good start.
A huge need.
All right, any questions for Sandra? If not, I entertain a motion.
Well, I have a question. I notice most of them, the facilities are religious oriented. Is there going to be a component where they have to participate?
No, they'll have to follow fair housing law so they can offer religious services or support, but it can't be mandated. And currently, the People's Foundation, they've actually negotiated an agreement with the Holy Apostle Church in East Wenatchee to use their facilities during the winter. Women's Resource Center are still working on some arrangements with local churches.
Thank you.
And the People's Foundation has had some experience doing this in other cities, so they have done this before.
I was very impressed with their presentation.
Yeah, they've
I know
worked.
what they're doing.
Yeah, they've worked in Olympia, and so they do have, quite a bit of experience doing that. So they're planning to accommodate up to 10 people per night. And so we think it would be a really good pilot program to get started in the low barrier vein.
Has anyone else done this before, previously, or this is brand new?
For our area, it would be new, but cold weather shelters, severe weather shelters have been very common. Moses Lake has one, for instance. Yakima have different ones, and they tend to be open for a couple months during the year.
All right, any other questions for Sandra? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I move for City Council to accept the steering committee's recommendations and authorize the mayor to enter into grant agreements with sub-grantees as recommended by the Homeless Task Force.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Harold, second by Councilmember Bailey to accept the steering committee's recommendation, authorize the mayor to enter into grant agreements with sub-grantees as recommended by the Homeless Task Force.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion? We got to vote. Let's vote.
Sorry.
This could be close.
Don't
I
think
don't
as
know. Do we have everybody raise their hands or eyes okay on this one? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Now we're good. Good job, Sandra. All right, change order on the convention center bathrooms.
Your
Aaron
Honor,
and Elise.
I will recuse myself on this
Is
next
that
item.
because you don't use those bathrooms or what?
You asked me this once before, too.
Oh, okay, that is?
It's getting old.
Was it the
Every
same,
day.
was it the same question?
Yes.
All right, evening, Mayor, Council. Aaron Kelly, Public Works Operations Manager, and Alyssa Webb, our Facilities Manager. We're here we're here tonight to have two actions to bring before you for Project 1619, the remodel to the lower level restrooms at the Wenatchee Convention Center. The original contract was approved back in February, and with one change order that we brought back to you actually earlier in March, sorry. And with a total of 172,773 was the current contract amount. We have had a few minor modifications during construction. These included some additional framing, plumbing, and a second coat of paint, totaling just over $2,000. We also did find throughout the project that some recommendations, including that we replace the existing doors versus retrofitting them, and that also that we didn't need some other bathroom accessories. So total, the change order number 2 is going to actually give us a credit of $7,181. And basically what we're recommending, or staff recommends the City Council to authorize the mayor to approve change order number 2 in the credit amount of $7,181.50 and accept the work performed by the contractor Hildebrand Construction Incorporated on the Convention Center restroom upgrade, project number 1619. And further authorize the mayor to sign the final construction voucher certification in behalf of the city of Wenatchee. Any questions? So I've been mayor almost 8 years. You're saying that we're actually reducing the contract price?
Yeah.
I guess we extended it first, then we reduced it. Okay. Is that not true?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Aaron or Lisa?
Your Honor, I make a motion for City Council to authorize the mayor to approve change order number 2 in the credit amount of, I just needed to say that, sorry, $7,181.50. Accept the work performed by the contractor Hildebrand Construction, Inc. on the Convention Center restroom upgrade, project number 1619, and further authorize the mayor to sign the final construction voucher certification on behalf of the city of Wenatchee.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Esparza to authorize the mayor to approve change order number 2 in the credit amount of $7,181.50. Accept the work performed by the contractor Hildebrand Construction, Inc. on the Convention Center restroom upgrade project number 1619, and further authorize the mayor to sign the final construction voucher certification on behalf of the city of Wenatchee. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank
Feels
you.
good to say credit, doesn't it?
I know. Never had it. All right, so the next item we have is a public hearing item. This is regarding an annexation of property in the city of Wenatchee. So we'll first hear from staff, and then once we've asked questions of staff, we'll ask any member of the audience if they wish to address the council, and then we'll turn it back over to the council for any action they may take. So we'll start with city staff presentation. So Glenn DeVries, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm filling in for Brooklyn Holton this evening. If you recall, this is a hearing item that has previously before you and continued to this evening. I just wanted to quickly note that there's two changes to the resolution before you. One is a whereas to Note that this is a continued item from July 11th to this evening. And the second change is at the very end of the resolution, simply to note that this is October, not July. So those are the changes in the resolution. If you recall, on May 23rd, a 10% petition for annexation was brought before the Wenatchee City Council, looking at the property located to the west of Skyline Drive in Miller Block A. It doesn't have street frontage. This is a parcel that is a remnant. It's a small piece. There was a dispute between property owners, and this piece would come together with the remainder of the property as is right now. It's this sort of island floating out there. So this is a matter that would clean that up. 60% petition annexation was submitted by the property owner and provided to the Chelan County Assessor and certified by the Chelan County Assessor. Chelan County established a boundary review board, which has not been enacted, but we have provided them a notice to intent to annex. Let's see, actually this resolution would provide that notice to the boundary review board, and then upon completion of a set time period, then what would occur is we would come back before you should you approve the resolution tonight, and should the Chelan County Boundary Review Board not go into action and review the matter, then it would come simply back before you for an ordinance to adopt the annexation. So our request this evening is that you approve Resolution 2019-35, providing the notice of intent to annex to and transmitting the notice to the Chelan County Boundary Review Board on completion of the requirements of Chapter 3693 RCW. The proposed annexation would be brought back to the council in a public meeting for final action. Staff would stand for any questions now or throughout the proceeding.
All right. Any questions for Glenn regarding the continuation of this hearing and the Tramp annexation and where it sits today? I was not here in the meeting on July 25th, so I can't comment as to the continuation.
So to be clear, what we're being asked to do is to take action to send this on to the Boundary Review Board scrutiny. This doesn't confer any other additional rights to the property in terms of its use or that. It's just strictly a boundary issue.
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, it's doesn't provide any approvals with respect to any land use applications. This is solely oriented to the annexation of the property, sending that notice to the Boundary Review Board, and then setting it up that upon completion of that process, we'd bring it back to the council for a public meeting for final action with an ordinance.
Thank you.
Well, and I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm assuming probably since you're going ahead with this that I'm wrong, but I thought at one point we had agreed to stop sending these things to the non-existent board, or boundary review board.
You are 100% correct. This had started off in that direction and been continued. So we're just completing that process since it headed that direction originally.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Glenn? Seeing none, I will then turn it over to any member of the audience who wishes to address the council on this public hearing item that's been continued from our July 25th, 2019 meeting regarding the Tramp annexation. Seeing no takers, I will turn it over to the council for any action they may have.
Your Honor, I make a motion for the City Council to approve Resolution number 2019-35, providing for notice of intention to annex an unincorporated area located to the west of Skyline Drive in Millardale Block A that is bordered to the south and west by the urban growth area boundary, to the north by current city limits, and to the east by undeveloped land that fronts Skyline Drive, also known as the Tramp annexation.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Kulas, second by Councilmember Bailey to approve Resolution 2019-35, providing for notice of intention to annex an unincorporated area located to the west of Skyline Drive and the Milladero Block A that is bordered to the south and west by urban growth area boundary, to the north by the current city limits, and to the east by undeveloped land that fronts Skyline Drive, also known as the Tramp annexation. Any discussion?
Is this a 60-day review?
No, I don't think it's
30
60.
day.
Like,
45.
yeah, it's
45?
Yeah, it's more like 45.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Glenn. Before we do the budget, do you guys want to take a break? Should we keep going? How's everyone feeling?
That's
good. All right.
How much time is it going to take to show us where the fluff's at?
This is going to take somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes, I would guess.
Okay.
Yeah,
I already have it.
I've already been through that, yeah.
I've already seen it. Yeah, I've got it on my desk.
Thank you.
I have a copy.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, you needed something back from me.
So for those that aren't on the Finance Committee, we've sort of gone through our preliminary budget process, which included sort of our normal process, and that Brad and I sit down, look at the revenues. We then take a list of asks from the department heads. I think there was 90 separate asks or so, Brad?
Yep, 90 something.
Okay, so we went through that the last time that the Finance Committee met, which I think was 2 weeks ago. And I think we agreed on about 95 to 96% of the asks and not asks, which you now have in your preliminary budget. So Brad will go over that in a little bit more detail. We're still $215,610 out of whack. But I'll let Brad go through it in a little bit of detail, and then we can talk about what the next steps might be.
Well, Mayor, I think you covered it.
Yeah.
My work's done. If you refer to the 2020 preliminary budget summary that's in your packet, let's start with that. As the mayor said, we basically started with last year's, not last year's, the 2019 budget, and we had all the contractual salaries, benefits, other contracts we have for services that just have natural, already agreed upon increases. We built those in, and then a couple weeks ago, that list of requests that you are seeing again, the Finance Committee reviewed those, looked at them again today. Currently, when we look at the preliminary budget summary, I think the number that I'd point you towards is that under the recurring section, it says net recurring negative 215,000. Per our policies, that number has to be 0 or a positive number. It can't be negative when we adopt our budget. So we've got a month between now and when we do adopt the budget to make the final tweaks on that to bring it back in bring it back up to 0. The non-recurring amount, because we do have healthy reserves in the general fund. There were some items that were carrying over from 2019 that didn't get completed, but we are budgeting for 2.7 in one-time spending that will spend down a little bit of the fund balance. We're planning on taking that fund balance from 8 million down to 6 million if everything plays out as budgeted, but usually we end up beating our budget a little bit. So again, the ending fund balance shows about just under 5.8, but once we clean up that negative 200,000, that'll bring us up to that 6 million, which is still a very comfortable fund balance for the city's general fund. As you go through that document, you can see the breakdown of the different departments. Most of the changes in here are just the regular increases for salaries and benefits. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into some of these. Their economic development, that's a larger increase number. It's because they went from a department of 1 employees to a department of 2 middle of last year, and that's increasing officer position. So that one increased that. Otherwise, I guess if you've got questions on any of these amounts, if you've got questions on any of the requests, I know the mayor's got a couple questions for you as well.
Yeah, I get it. I'm looking at page 47 of 54 in my council packet that's got the revenue side. So I do want to make sure that the council is comfortable with the revenue numbers that we've projected here. I'm also looking for a little bit on process. Do you want Brad and I to sit in a smoke-filled room someday next week and sort of punch this thing to the finish line? Do you have any particular suggestions in terms of things that didn't get funded that you'd like to see funded? Are you comfortable with the revenue numbers that we've showed here? I think that's some sort of guidance if you want Brad and I to sit down and figure out that I got some comfort level in what those revenue numbers are, so that when we sit down and try to balance the budget. I think a couple of sort of overriding factors that we talked about today at Finance Committee is the desire to try to get enough money for Rob to do that $4.5 million street overlay project for next year. So we do have a lot of our REIT number going back into roads again. We got, I think, $3 million of property tax going into roads again under this current budget. We don't know what's going to happen with I-976. If that passes, he will take a $600,000 haircut starting in December. So I don't know how we're supposed to plan that into our budget, other than that would clearly come out of his next year's program, most likely. And so if we use the REIT, let's say, and I-976 passes, well, we just took a $4.5 million project and made it a $3.5 million project, right? I mean, we literally, that would be the cut if you're asking me to use REIT funds. So we've tried to get as much sales tax to the street fund and as much of the REIT funds to that as we can. So I just want you to sort of know that. And so I'm looking for, I guess, direction on revenue and then direction on process. If you want Brad and I to work this out and then bring you a balanced budget and sort of tell you what we did. So I'm sort of looking for some guidance from you all before we go much further.
Well, Mayor, I'd like to look at what the future council and Confluence Health, if that should be revisited.
Okay. So I will say sort of this, I think, when you look at the minus $215,000 that we currently are out of whack, we did hear a little bit at Finance Committee today about the desire to add the one police officer that isn't funded. So Chief asked for the backfill, I think another officer, and then an administrative to help with all the stuff that they got going on over there. I think it was the desire of the council to try to fund all three of those, but if we added another 130,000 or whatever another officer would be, we'd be upside down 300 and some $1,000. And so that, again, given the revenue projections that we have here, that's probably more than Brad and I can pull out of our back pockets and underneath the couch. So we did talk a little bit about, is it time for a more of a structured B&O tax for Confluence Health to pay for additional police officers? Is that something that council is interested in looking at? If they are, we can give you some numbers that might help with that. If we're not, then we got to go to different places, and that third officer won't get funded. Clearly, that won't get funded, and then we would have to make some other sort of adjustments along the route. I just don't think we can quite get there if we don't. So that was something the Finance Committee talked about. Again, I'd like some guidance that way. If you think there's, I think the thing that I mentioned to them today was, well, if we decide that that's something we're interested in doing, I would want to put some sort of parameters around the number. My sort of feeling has been somewhere around $600,000 or so. And if you did that starting next July, pass the ordinance this December, effective next July 1, that would get you enough to sort of cover the deficit, plus probably get Chief as the last officer that he wanted. I think that gives Brad and I enough room. We could probably make the rest of that work. But if we don't have that, then that's fine. Then obviously that won't get funded, and we'll work some accounting magic, and we'll debit a few things and credit some other stuff. And next thing you know, we'll get it balanced. So I guess those two things are just sort of out there for discussion. Don't necessarily need the answer today, but some direction would certainly help as we try to work these numbers into a balanced spot. So I think I'm just reiterating what we talked about at Finance today.
I still feel pretty strongly that we need to go back to Confluence Health and find some kind of deal with them. And part of my feeling there is just the amount of property that they're tying up right now that's generating $0 for the city. You know, they either need to figure out how to turn loose of a bunch of those properties and consolidate onto their property, or somehow compensate us for the property tax and the revenue that we're losing off of those properties. And somehow, I agree with you, that number needs to be tied to something like that, so that it's not just an arbitrary.
Yeah, I think what you see, and again, you see all different variations of this. Obviously, in Western Washington, all the communities have B&O tax. That's just what they live on, and that's just part of their taxing structure. Obviously, in Eastern Washington, that doesn't happen much. When you look around the country and you look at PILT agreements and payment in lieu of tax agreements, what you're starting to see is stuff like, yeah, we'll pay you some money. And then they'll get to the end of the year and they go, well, remember we built that building and that paid you sales tax and we did this. And so then you budget for a PILT number and they don't pay it to you because they've done all these other sorts of things. And so at some point, and I just think the more I sort of look at this, the more I think, I don't want to strong arm. I just think at a certain point, we got to make the decision and say, this is in the best interest of our region and our police department and public safety and roads. I don't think we go after them for $2 or $3 million. I don't think that's the right number. I think there's something that's reasonable that would get us to where we want to go, that shows the fact that they're, again, taking up property and their patients drive on our roads, and you know, it's the property tax that really hurts the most, that they're not sort of paying into that part of the system. And we can't property tax them, but we can, tax them.
No, I agree. I think we need to come back and revisit that. I'd like to see
Okay.
Run the numbers and stick it in and see what it looks like.
See how that works? Okay. Anybody else have any suggestions or ideas?
Nothing contrary.
Okay. I think we got our marching orders.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So when you come back with the changes on the budget,
We will give you a list of
you
what they
just,
are.
yeah, make it
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Because we already gone.
So, yeah, you're going to see you'll see the.
Well, no, just
Yeah.
10, just see 10 things. I changed this list.
Yeah, you'll see them. All right, mayor's report. Usually what I do is I go to my calendar and see where I've been. I will tell you this, we are meeting regularly with county commissioners. We meet once a month, the first Tuesday at 11:30. That's been very beneficial to have this in their conference room. Just, they're in session, but it's very casual conversations. I think it's been really good in terms of the relationships between the city and the county. So we continue to talk about a lot of things, and so I think that's been really good. I went to the Tacoma Street pop-up event for a little bit. I know there were some folks down there. I thought it was pretty good turnout. I think that turned out really well. I didn't hear too much in terms of.
Yeah, I think we were well received by our neighborhood. For those of you who didn't know, we held a barbecue in the front yard of one of the people along Tacoma. When we shared this with the TIB board that was here in late September, they were really intrigued about that. It was a really great way to go out and get a neighborhood to comment on a project. We thought it went well. We'll probably do it again, not in the winter.
Yeah. And you fed a lot of people. They were coming from everywhere. I don't know how many people you fed that night, but.
Probably more than
The word got out.
Food.
Yeah.
Driving by and smelled the dogs.
Yeah. And thank you guys for working on the city video. I don't know when we're going to have it out, but it'll be a sort of a while. But yeah, other than that, I don't see too much other stuff. Transportation Council met today. I think much to Allison's surprise, I think our legislative priorities are going to be all of Confluence Parkway and another $45 million for North Wenatchee Avenue.
Excellent.
In terms of
We
other
were ready.
improvements to North Wenatchee
So-
Avenue. So that will be the Transportation Council's request to our legislators. So that's good for us. I don't know how the legislative session is going to go, whether there's going to be a transportation package or not, but we'll just have to watch that and sort of stay focused on that. Other than that, I don't really have anything. Council members, anything for the good of the order?
We're having Wells House having a nook and crannies tour.
I saw that.
On the 19th and 20th, which is going to go every footwear from the basement to the top. There might be a possibility of leasing some room to the foundation,
Okay.
Wenatchee Valley County
College,
Foundation.
right, I heard that.
That's the main news there.
Okay.
Just a reminder, for our work session next week, we have a little bit of a conversation about legislative agenda.
Yes, okay.
And so be thinking about that. I'll be sending, I won't, I'll have Tammy send it.
Okay.
Some materials out for you to review and think about, some things to think about.
Okay. What do we have on next week's work agenda?
So we have the legislative conversation for you as council members to
Okay.
set an agenda, and then we have the homeless plan, and we have housing, sign code. Housing.
Housing code? Okay. Excellent. Anything else for the good of the order?
Coming up on October 30th at, what is it, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. is going to be the ribbon cutting for the moderate waste facility.
Oh, I saw that. And I'm not going to be able to be here. I'm going to be out of town, so.
For what group?
Moderate waste facility.
Yeah, that Chelan Douglas Health District finally got their solid waste,
Well,
whatever, did the.
Yeah, Chelan County Solid Waste.
Yeah.
Bit of a difference in the way we'd planned on getting it opened and funding it, just
Right.
because of
Yeah.
loss of funding from the state
Ecology.
and from ecology, so.
Now, I know.
We did end up paying a little bit more out of the city and surrounding areas are paying in more to cover it. The main idea was to try and get it open and see what it was gonna actually cost to keep it open.
Okay.
I'm pushing real hard to go back to a donation system or a fee-based system. The idea of a fee-based system is then if we get residents from Douglas County,
Right.
we have a way of increasing how much they would pay since they're not participating in the program at all.
Yeah.
But we are working with Douglas County right now, and I've
Okay.
heard some good talks are going on that maybe
Good.
they will start actively participating.
Because there's going to be operational costs, right? Obviously,
Yep.
there's going to be operational costs, and
Yep.
and I think that's part of our contract.
All the
with them.
waste and
Yeah.
somebody to open it or maintain it.
I'm excited because Chrissy's son changes the oil in the driveway and leaves us all this oil we got to do something with. We have a place to go take it.
We don't
Keith,
put it
what
on
time
the
was it?
I don't.
3 p.m. on
30th.
October 30th.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
We will be sending out a schedule of events, so there's been an effort led primarily by David Olson, Columbia Valley Community Health, to have our area looked at as a blue zone. So there are a series of meetings on November 6th, 5th and 6th. And there's some community meetings and some focus group meetings, and so
Yeah, if some of you can get to those, I think that would be good. It's an interesting, we're going to need a lot of feedback as to whether we jump into that with both feet or not, or just, so.
the interesting nuance in this one, there are choices for when you're looking at becoming that healthy community, and there was recognition of the significant work that we've done in pedestrian and planning, kind of multimodal planning. And so the other option was your food ecosystem. So I think it kind of speaks to Councilmember Koulas's thing about our food desert and areas where we have access to food. So they have a food expert who will come in and do a system assessment. And it really goes well with the work that's going on in South Wenatchee and kind of the commercial kitchen and Pybus and a lot of that work too. So that will be an interesting nuance to this. Apples, the mayor's idea, we're the apple capital of the world, apples at every office, so.
Allison, will there be some information coming out on the where and when and all that?
Yes. Mhm.
All right. Okay, I guess with nothing else, we're adjourned.